Welcome to Lesson 5 in Unit 5, Tiny Flyers. In this lesson, students will work to answer the question, how do hummingbirds get food? In this lesson, students investigate how different birds feed their young. They then use bird cards to find patterns between birds' beak shape and the food they eat. Students figure out that bird beaks are designed to help them gather the food they need for themselves and to feed their young. Students make connections to the storyline, exploring how the ruby-throated hummingbird beak is designed to feed its young. There are several opportunities for ELA cross-curricular connections throughout the lesson. You can look for specific standard connections in the Unit 5 teacher guide. This lesson will take approximately 6 days to complete. For the engage portion of the lesson, you'll ask students what they've figured out about the ruby-throated hummingbird so far. You'll then ask how they think baby hummingbirds can eat if they can't leave the nest. You'll replay the video of baby hummingbirds from Lesson 4 and ask students what they notice and wonder. You'll return to the driving question board and add any new questions and highlight others connected to the learning goals of this lesson by calling attention to questions about how baby birds eat if they can't leave their nest. You'll tell students that they are going to start investigating their questions. For the explore portion, you'll ask students what they think birds like to eat. You'll also ask questions about how birds are able to pick up their food and how they could figure out what it's like for birds to pick up their food. You'll set up the bird beak stations so that students can model using different types of beaks to pick up several different kinds of food. You can find detailed instructions and a tutorial linked in the teacher guide. Students will learn about how bird beaks are designed to help birds eat different foods. They will figure out that birds can then bring this food to their young. You can either have students rotate through all 6 stations or have a group of students complete one station, then share what they found with the whole class. You can pause this video here to review the materials needed for this investigation. You'll pass out the Bird Beak Buffet data sheets, student journal pages, and explain how to fill them out as they go to each station. Students should not fill out the last row of boxes until the end of the station activities. After students rotate through each station, you'll allow them to take the beaks and rotate the beaks to different stations. For example, allow the tongs to travel to the other 5 stations, attempting to get the food. In this way, students can see that the beaks are uniquely matched to a particular food source. For the explain portion, you'll invite students to gather in a circle to share their findings from their bird beak investigations. Use the provided questions to guide your discussion around the question, how do hummingbirds get food? The goal for this class discussion is to analyze student data and find a pattern that helps students explain how birds get a certain type of food to their young. Have students bring their Bird Beak Buffet data sheets, student journal pages, to the discussion. Use this discussion to create the Lesson 5 summary chart. By the end of the discussion, students should know that bird beaks are designed to help them gather food that they need for their young. Hummingbirds use their beaks like a straw to suck up nectar, then feed it to their babies. To deepen student reasoning, students will revise the responses on the last row of the Bird Beak Buffet data sheets student journal page. For the elaborate portion of the lesson, you'll place students into groups of 3 or 4 and provide each group with a set of bird cards. Students will lay out all their cards on the table, picture side up. They will then try to categorize them based on their beak shape. Once they have their categories made, they will predict what the birds might eat based on the shape of their beak. Students will record 3 different types of food and draw or describe the beak shape for that type of food on the Bird Beaks and Food student journal page. For the evaluate portion, you'll use the plastic bird models from the kit to ask students to predict how each type of bird might use its beak to get food. You'll have students turn and talk to partners about their predictions. You'll allow students to justify their prediction based on what they have learned in this lesson. For the summative assessment, you'll have students return to the Hummingbird Story student journal page. You'll tell them that they are going to finish the story of the ruby-throated hummingbird. You can have students add to their story independently at this point. If students are struggling, you can model this as a class. You'll then invite students to gather in a circle to review what they've learned about how the ruby-throated hummingbird helps its young survive, how the baby hummingbirds look similar but not exactly like adult hummingbirds, and how the hummingbird migrates. The goal of this class discussion is for teams to revisit the learning throughout the unit and to wrap up the unit. To support student sense-making across the unit, orient students back to the driving question board. Ask, what have we learned about the ruby-throated hummingbird? Are there any questions we have not answered? Try to wrap up any final questions on the driving question board before the end of the unit. Refer to the Section 2 performance levels in the assessment tracker to summatively assess student progress for this section. Have students use the self-check form to evaluate their own learning in this section. This is an instructional tool that can be used as a metacognitive practice for students to reflect on their learning, express their engagement or excitement levels for the topics they have learned so far, and reflect on their science identities or community. By the end of this lesson, students will have used evidence from investigations to construct an explanation for how bird beaks aid birds in feeding their young. They will have obtained information about different birds to find patterns between the shape of their beak and the food they eat. For more information about this unit, visit myscipartners.com.